Hello and welcome to the last episode of the year. This is the show called Two Wizards and a Mic. I am Shane, and to my other side here,
I am Andrew.
and we are basically old people now that play D&D because it's fun. We're talking about two. We're talking about the top 10 monsters that we think are the top 10 monsters in D&D. But I'm going to pause for a second. We had some big updates last week. Is there anything updated this week?
Yes, so today is our Christmas show. The Kickstarter update is that the PDF is almost ready. The final edits are done. The final layout is just finishing. We're just making a couple of tweaks, but hopefully it should be done by the end of the week, and we'll get that out to our Kickstarter backers. It looks like printed books will probably be after Christmas, but we'll see. We'll get to work on that after the PDF is ready.
Very
And
cool.
part of the team is also actually preparing the next Kickstarter, which should be in January or February for the sixth book.
Nice. And of course, if you're wondering where these books are coming from, this particular show is brought to you by Cawood Publishing at worldofmere.com. If you want any of the books, you can find links to them there. All right, the top 10 monsters. Now, I know that you and I have thrown in sort of half and half, and I went really classic. But what is the first on our list? That number 10.
All right. So, number 10, we have the Roper. And this is an iconic D&D monster from the beginning of D&D. It was in right at the beginning, and it's on some of the famous covers and some of the famous art in the first
Yeah.
adventures, especially versions by Errol Otis, an amazing artist who kind of does a little more abstract version. So they are usually found in caves. They're these giant creatures with tendrils and a big mouth that basically the tendrils can pull you into the mouth, and then you get munched. They're pretty tough. They're not as tough in fifth edition as in some previous editions. Um, but the cool thing is you can not only have them standing up, but you can have them hanging down in a cave too, which usually surprises
Yeah.
characters. So their tendrils will actually go down and grab people and pull them up. They can grab multiple creatures at the same time, and there's usually a lot of suspense as they're grappling these creatures and then trying to bring them into their mouth. And another kind of extra item is you can add some things that they've eaten in their stomach. So if the players end up searching the Roper, if they survive.
Of
But this
course.
is a really classic underground cavern monster. And yeah, I use them all the time.
Yeah, I do recall several encounters with the Roper. There's been some, I mean, especially on the ceiling, actually, because I mean, a lot of the time when you're going into places, I mean, that's just the perfect time for those kinds of things to be kind of hanging
Mhm.
around, quite literally. Um, yeah, I they're evil. They're totally. I like fighting them. Wouldn't want to be one. What's at number 9?
Number 9, we have the Rust Monster. So these are a classic D&D creature. A lot of the monsters are from mythology, folklore, but there's a number, including the Roper and the Rust Monster, that are, I think, completely unique to Dungeons and Dragons. Many
Yeah.
of the actually monsters we chose on the top 10 are completely unique. And this is a reminder that great monsters in the game don't have to be really powerful, because at low levels, these cause all kinds of grief. Um,
Yeah.
they obviously, their attack is that if they get a hold of your weapon or your armor, it can rust and it can completely just ruin your item. Um, yeah, and these can be roaming around in dungeons or caves. So what else do you? I know you love these guys. What do you think about these?
I love the Rust Monster because one of the first supplementary sort of books. I mean, it's actually I think it was in actually the red my first collection of stuff. It was that the paperback red book. So um, yeah, because I loved that creature mainly because it looked so weird. Because when you're 11 years old, you're like, that looks so strange. What is that thing?
Yeah.
It kind of looks like it was a propeller. I always thought it actually flew initially because
Oh, really?
the tendril on the back of the original drawing looks like a propeller. Um, but yeah, that was one of the coolest monsters ever because it was able to destroy your armor, which was the big thing for me. Actually, I seem to recall, didn't we run into one like an adventure or two ago? Um, I
Yeah.
think because when it was the first time that I had seen one in gameplay for like a long time.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd used one in fifth edition when we used fifth edition rules, and that was in our northern sort of Viking campaign,
Yeah,
in a hidden ancient dungeon. Yeah,
it made me happy. I mean, it's just one of the it's like you have your firsts of all
yeah,
kinds, and I think for me, the first monster that I really kind of uh, latched onto as being a D&D monster was the Rust monster. And yeah, it has a place in my heart for creatures. Even though not seen that often, but it's very cool.
all right.
Now, number 8.
Number 8, the Slaadi. So these are quite quite the creatures. They, I believe, are unique to D&D as well. They're these powerful, large frog-like creatures. They are
Yeah,
very tough. I would only probably let these loose on characters that are maybe around eighth level and above. They would just destroy
yeah.
any characters below that. They're very powerful. One even has a great sword that is the last thing. You never want to see a monster who has extra abilities and a great sword. Some of them have magic too, attack magic. They're magically
Oh man,
resistant. They have tons of resistances to different types of damage, like cold and fire, I think, and lightning. They can regenerate, so that's another like horrible thing. I always love to tell players the wounds you've just caused are closing. Everybody knows.
I was just gonna say that. That's every so often you'll have, and it looks like they're looking pretty rough. However, it looks like they're feeling a little better as you're watching wounds close. Like darn.
Yeah. Okay, now the coolest part of all about Slatty is, and there's many types, um, is that with a claw attack, they can infect the victim if they don't make their constitution save with a tiny Slatty egg. And this egg
That's
starts to
right.
grow. And 3 months later, suddenly the character starts to feel like their stomach has some issues. And if it is not cured immediately, like within that time period. If it's not cured, it's alien time, and the creature emerges from the stomach cavity, leaving the character behind.
I don't think we've had that happen. I know that we've had to roll for Constitution saves, but I don't think we've actually failed, or at least I haven't
Yeah.
failed anyway.
Yeah. I think you've
Now that
all
I've said
made
that,
your.
though, I can picture you going, yeah, but don't forget the adventure we haven't played in a few months. You know
Yeah.
that one? It's three
Yeah.
months later.
You've all made your saves at this point, I believe, in because I've only used those on higher level characters. However, in the other
True.
group that I'm running,
Oh.
there's someone who didn't make their save. So we'll see how that turns out.
Now, I guess my assumption is that unless you have a character that has some sort of knowledge about what those creatures are, that the player or the character would be completely unaware they've been infected with an egg. I assume.
Yeah, until the 3 month point, or yeah, or if the dungeon master decides to let them know at the beginning they feel something. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably wait till 3 months, but then you have to know, you have to figure out what you have to do, and you have to do it fast. Um,
Right.
I do tell players when they're poisoned that they feel
Yeah.
it hit their system, because I know what that feels like, having been poisoned myself. And
Ooh.
you know how it feels. Like,
Right.
some things are more obvious than not. I remember particularly when I was stung by a wasp once, I could actually feel the poison moving through my bloodstream. Um, it didn't harm, like there was no harm done, but
Yeah.
because a lot of creatures, like in South Africa where I grew up, there's a lot of spiders that have poisons. I think most spiders have poisons, and a lot of snakes, but many of
Yeah.
them are not very strong. But you still
Right.
might feel it moving through your system. Yeah, like the
I
tarantula.
I
Yeah,
re-
we have a lot of tarantulas there, but their bite is not as poisonous as the tarantula in South America, for example.
well, I had a tarantula for a number of years, and I never thankfully got bitten by them, but it molted quite often, and you'd see the delivery system, as it were.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying because I remember being bitten by a spider out, I was gardening or something, and it was this little tiny yellow thing. And, it's like, how did you break my skin? But wow, that really is painful.
Hmm.
I just kind of, put it on a leaf and said, go bite something else. But yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah. So I would
very,
do that
very
for poisons, but I wouldn't do that for the slag
eggs
and
about to burst out of a character's chest.
well, at that point I
All
would,
right.
but not initially. All right. So number 7, we have the gelatinous cube, another iconic monster from D&D. And then that one is really interesting. How it's one of those that is really, even it's bigger than the game almost. People might even
Oh,
know
yeah.
might know that creature and not know Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, they can cause, again, another good example how a great monster like this one can cause all kinds of problems for low level characters. At high level, not as big of a deal, but definitely the first few levels, this is something you do not want to run into. And because of what they look like, you can hide them in interesting ways.
Yeah.
So, there's the classic move for a dungeon master of putting one in a hallway, and then the characters at first just see these things floating in the air, and they don't realize
Yeah.
that they're actually inside a gelatinous cube. A
Yep.
really mean thing to do is to have a pit trap and put a gelatinous cube inside.
That's exactly what I was thinking because that was the first time ever having encountered one was just walking along a dungeon, not caring anything about anything, and then saying it's okay. You start sinking into the floor or what you think is the floor.
Right.
Um, because I remember, I think it was in Tomb of Horrors, one of the paths you can take, which I think ends up as a dead end.
Yeah.
You end up walking. I don't think it was a gelatinous cube, but I think it was like a slime of some sort, which I kind of
Right.
are very similar. So yeah, I mean it's the worst. And they look so cool. I mean that's the other thing too is they actually artists have been very very creative in what a gelatinous cube can look like.
Yeah.
And I think you've used them a couple times. And I seem to recall we actually ran into one, and one of the players actually was sucked into it, but there was something alive inside of it still. Like that thing that the gelatinous cube had swallowed was still alive and started to attack the other player. Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah, that was a weird one where the this actually this I think somebody actually ended up putting this in their book. Somebody basically took it off one of the message boards where the character in our group was talking about what they did. Because what they did for some reason was they, as a druid, they summoned sharks and put them inside the gelatinous cube.
That's right.
I'm not sure why they thought that was a good idea, but they immediately died. They didn't last very long at all. They're sharks. They live in water.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
And
I remember that very well.
somebody actually made this into a monster, decided not to credit us, and threw it into a book. Um, I'm
Hey,
pretty sure it was from the message board in our game. I remember the
burn.
player giving their reason that they gave was that it was science. That was the reason for the decision.
It was science. I wanted to see
Yeah.
what would happen.
Yeah, and you say here that you say they're like eat and eat and eat. Yeah, so a number of cubes and oozes will a hint that they're around is that the dungeon is exceptionally clean. All living creatures and
Yeah.
organic material has been wiped away, and you might want to notice that.
This is a very clean dungeon. There's no spider webs. There's nothing around. There's nothing on the
Yeah,
floor. Yeah.
yeah. So those are great ones. At number 6, we have the cloaker, which you mentioned, another creature from D&D, and I don't think from folklore. And
Yeah, this is a creature that back in first edition, in the old days, I liked the artwork of it. I thought it looked
yeah,
very cool. It kind of was like this weird hood thing, and
yeah,
um, but when we were going to do a top 10, I actually I actually reread the thing, and I hadn't realized that the lore for those creatures is that they are kind of mysterious. No one really knows a lot about them. You can't talk to them because they have their own way of communicating, which seems to be noise based. And But they've also in the Underdark, and which is where I knew they sort of came from, at least in my mind.
hmm
Um, but they've apparently have a city, and that was the part that I had to reacquaint myself. And I thought, what a cool creature! This has to be in our top 10 because uh, I just remembered it. I thought that was one of the names that popped in my mind. I thought, great. And I'm like, but they have a civilization? What? What? I don't remember this. That's kind of awesome. But yeah, I mean, that artwork initially back in the day was what hooked me, and I'm kind of glad they have an underground society of some sort. So yeah, I mean that's kind of nice. But yeah, dangerous as all hell too. And that was the
yeah.
other thing too. They reminded me of in the movie Time Bandits. They're at the very end of the film. Spoilers, for those who haven't seen it. There are these creatures that are kind of cloaker-like that grab you and then digest you almost immediately and drop your bones on the floor. And that has always been sort of what I visualized for a cloaker. So it's emblazoned on my mind.
Yeah, they are something that usually parties are quite nervous about. And the effect of wrapping themselves around someone's
Yeah,
head and you can't see, that's always unsettling, like it should be. Um, I believe they've changed them quite a bit from first edition to fifth edition. I'm just going to look up here to see what I can find on them. Um, At number 5, one of my favorites, but not because I like them, I just test them, but I love to see them defeated, and that is the vampire.
oh,
Um,
of course.
Now, they are obviously very resourceful. They have lots of ways to escape, which is always scary. They have legendary
Yeah,
actions. So, this in fifth edition means that not only do they have their attacks, but 3 times after another player has, or NPC has attacked, they can attack again. Um,
yeah,
so, not many creatures have these, but vampires do. They are extremely evil, often have minions, and one of the most, and they're very difficult to kill because they can hide their bodies somewhere or even multiple places, their remains. Um, One of the most dangerous things is that because they're so intelligent, um, they're going to do things like if a character goes down and they might not be, and they might be dead or they're not sure, they'll go over and kill them again. They'll go over and stab them or whatever. Where most monsters, like there's often these days, there's a new sort of D&D attitude about, oh, the monsters are smart and you've got to consider that and how strategic they are. That's just not true. Most of the monsters, probably 80% of them, are not very bright, especially the
that's true.
monsters you're fighting at low levels, like orcs and goblins and lizard men and most of the monsters, all the beasts. Um, some even very powerful monsters are not very bright. Some demons and devils are not bright. There's very few that are very, very clever, like a vampire or a rakshasa or an arc devil or powerful demon lord. So that's why they're so dangerous. Is that they're gonna, they'll escape if they need to. They won't hang around when they're losing. they're going to
Yeah.
surprise the characters, and they're going to, when they get a chance to take somebody out, they're going to take, I think, take them out. Um,
Well, yeah.
so
I mean, we've had
these are the
encounters with
monsters. If I
some.
was a player, these are the monsters that I'm worried about.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had an adventure where we got attacked by a vampire. We got the upper hand for whatever reason, and then they checked out. They're like, okay, I'm not going to beat them right now. I've been hurt too much. I'm out. But we spent like a good 15 more minutes, kind of, where is he? Got to look around. We're trying to figure out. But you were like, no, he left.
Right.
He's out. He booked it, and he's back in his castle already, or whatever the answer was. But yeah, no, we it's scary. They're terrifying, and
Yeah.
especially with the idea of a classic vampire. Um, the D&D is really latched into that, and they can be very debonair and very happy to see you, but that at the moment that they want to strike, they will, and they'll be difficult to stop.
Yeah, and you maybe make a good point about them, this sort of noble quality that can come with them. They can be nobles who have a lot of gold and who have a lot of, that means they can have a lot of resources. So they can have a
Exactly.
small army, their family could get involved, the spawn and thralls that they have, the undead creatures they've created, they could be involved.
Yeah.
So they are a handful. I just want to mention quickly because I look back at the Monster Manual 2, the original one.
Yeah.
So that's where the cloaker appears in a Monster Manual for the first time, and the new cloaker it's more about wrapping around the head, I believe.
Okay.
The original cloaker is actually the whole body. You wrap around and the idea was that it was a cloak. That's why it's called the cloaker.
Right.
And so they've kind of gone away from that. I'm not sure why, because it makes sense that that's the cloaker, and it's appears to be a cloak. And yeah, so I thought I'd mention that because I was pretty sure, thinking back, that the cloaker has changed.
Well, especially since the more modern artwork of them makes them look like they're a flying creature, and that to me has never really been a thing. I mean, maybe they do fly, back in the day, but I always picture them as sort of the hiding in the shadows and then suddenly wrapping around your entire body. But
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they always flew. They were always airborne. Yeah, because I can remember there's a classic image in the A1 to 4 series, I believe, the Slave Lord series. Yeah, they've always been. Yeah, the art has changed a bit though, for sure. All
Yeah.
right, so at number 4, golems. So
We
these are
run
very
into
dangerous.
golems a lot. Like
Yeah.
golems are like a staple creature in my mind because they are they can be made out of so many different things. Like you've had encounters back in the day with crystal golems and glass golems and all these kinds of things, and now they're flesh golems are my favorite, to be honest. But you had all of these interesting things you could do, because I guess now they're actually called a construct. Like they're back then they were just golems, but
Mhm.
mud golem or whatever. But I just think that they are a classic, and they're sort of up there. They're up there for me. They're up there with vampires, definitely. Like they are a creature that, sure, they're not that smart 99% of the time, but they're not just fodder either, like say skeletons or zombies,
Right.
which to me are just like, oh, they're here, knock them down, and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but golems have a bit more going on, where they have different, as is in here in our notes about them. They have resistance to a lot of things, um, but because they're made out of anything, you can encounter them almost anywhere. So to me, that's important for a creature that's not just fodder.
Yeah, and for a dungeon master, that's great because you can move the encounter around. It doesn't always have to be in the same place, which I think
Yeah,
is good because you never know what the players are going to do. You're right. They are constructs in general are a handful because of their resistances. They can have a lot of immunities as well, and often golems are used as guardians. I love using them. I use them quite a bit. Another creature like the
Mhm.
vampire that's from um, that's really an archetype, really, the vampire and the golem. They've been around for so long.
It's
I
true.
mean, people talked about those in medieval times, and we're still talking about them in the game now.
Well, exactly. Like the in terms of the golem, I mean, I was reading their summary, and one of the things that I noticed is someone actually had made a note saying back, I think, first edition and second edition, they had a thing called a living statue, and that creature was removed because it was basically the same thing as a golem. Because you could have stone golems, you could have granite golems, you could have whatever they were
Right.
made out of, and it was so that I think it's kind of interesting that you have this sort of evolution of these creatures and people actually looking at it going, well, we can have that living statue, but it's a living golem too, so why
Right.
why bother?
Yeah,
And
I'm pretty
yeah.
sure they just added that living statue in either Volos or the Tome of Foes. So they've just brought it back anyway, in addition to the
Oh, they
golems now. Yeah,
okay, well,
I think it is. I'd have to look, but I think it's in one of those new books again. Yeah. Um, there are also not a lot of really big, tough humanoid-like creatures. Like it's basically just giants and golems.
yeah,
Um, so that's interesting. I just had one fight in the other campaign, and on Sunday night, a stone one, and it was doing 25, 30 damage, and it's got two slams. It's so strong, this big thing, the big stone golem, and it's resistant to tons of things, and it's got 200 hit points. So that was a handful. I mean, even like their strongest character was an 8th level paladin. You know, it hit him. It hit the paladin 2 or 3 times, and the paladin was almost dead. So they're tough.
yeah. That's actually the fights that I think are the most fun because that I mean, when you're in at the end and you're about to like defeat the big bad, that can be kind of rewarding. But I gotta say, when you run into a creature like at around eighth level and it just wallops you, to me, that is actually more exciting than the end because you've got a chance with this character that you've been playing for 8 levels could just get whacked out of existence because you could have the creature that, as you said, has these 25 points of damage for a particular hit, and you do get that risk of oh, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it to the next room or whatever, and
Yeah,
which I find kind of nervous. It makes you nervous, but it kind of makes you excited as well because it's like, okay, no, we got to get creative in how we defeat this thing. But
yeah.
yeah, golems are so tough. Yeah,
Yeah, and of course,
hands
you don't
down.
usually roll perfectly. So I was rolling about 25 damage, but if I'd rolled perfectly, it would have been more like 40. So it potentially two hits,
Exactly.
and this pretty strong paladin is down. Like, so yeah, they're a good one, and like you say, they can be anywhere. At number three, Driders. So here's another classic creature just from D&D. The whole dark elf um, that whole culture is from Dungeons and Dragons and Gary Gygax.
Yeah.
And the first adventure you were saying that you ever played in, the Queen of the Demon Web Pits, or probably the D1 to 3 series as well.
Yeah, so because I
Um,
played through all of them, and then we got to that one because I think Demon Web Pits is actually the finale. I think,
it
if I
is,
remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so you're encountering Driders left, right, and center, and they're very powerful. And yeah, it kills a lot of players like out of the gate, like if you're not prepared for them. And they had classic artwork. I mean, the artwork for these creatures was just amazing. I mean, the entire Demon Web Pits module is filled with it. So yeah, and not to mention, I think it also had doesn't the map, if memory serves, the map for Demon Web is actually in the shape of a spider or a drider. So which added to that for me anyway as a kid.
yeah, for sure. I think the temple, Loth's temple, might have been the shape of a spider. But yeah, that was
I
the
think I think
Q.
there was I do recall that, but
Yeah, that was the Q1 adventure after you've done G1 to 3 and then D1 to 3. It
yeah.
was an epic campaign, my favorite actually. Um, So yeah, they're this sort of combination between a centaur and a drow, like a drow torso on a spider body, and
Yeah.
extremely dangerous even in 5e. And yeah, that whole world of the drow and the driders and the demon queen, spider queen Loth, that whole world can be a campaign that could go on for years. Um,
Oh, totally. Like, I'm surprised we haven't. We should go there sometime.
oh yeah, well you've had you've had two campaigns that have gone there for part of the time. The last time you
Right.
bolted, you decided you didn't want to be in a city with thousands of drow, and you decided to
Yeah,
leave.
we did run. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do have a vague memory of that.
but you weren't, really, really high level, and I think you have to be pretty high level to survive in the Underdark for a long period of time. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah, and
dragons
I
are
think we'd accomplished what we needed to accomplish too. And it's like, okay, guys, we better cut and run. Otherwise, this is going to get bad real fast.
right. Yeah, we I should mention we have a even more powerful version of the Drider in our Underworld book, and a more powerful Roper version because yeah, they're pretty tough, but we made them even tougher. All right, number two, in the name of the game, Dungeons and Dragons. So
That's right.
I never get tired of them, although I wouldn't use them all the time because that I think sort of loses some of the mystery and the power of a dragon.
Yeah.
So I would say that many times I use them maybe every 5 or 10 levels in a lot of campaigns, but not every campaign. Um, there's many kinds, and they all have their different attacks and personalities and things they can do. Some are more like a beast, like a white dragon is basically just like a big, powerful beast. It's not very smart. But
Right.
most of the other dragons, one of the reasons they're so dangerous is like a vampire. They're super smart and they have legendary weapons. In fifth edition, even their lairs and the regions around their lairs they can use as can have effects. So, they can even have the creatures around the lair watching them, like like that bird in the Hobbit movie that spies on the
Oh,
dwarves for Smog and then
yeah.
flies back to him and tells him. So that's in the game. The breath weapons are super intimidating because they can wipe out a party, let alone characters. They're really cool because they can move around the battlefield. Obviously, dragons they can all fly. Some of them are good at climbing. One of my favorite times I used a dragon was when you knew you were hunting a black dragon and you were on the way to
Yeah.
you're in a boat on the way to the woods where you thought the dragon's lair was, and this might have been just before you joined that main adventure, and then all of a sudden this dragon rises up out of the ocean in front of them, sends their boat flying, and I remember the look of horror on the players' faces. We hadn't played that long together, and they just all looked at me and said, "It can swim?" And they say that as the boat is destroyed, it's just like debris floating in the ocean now, and their characters are like trying to stay above water, and they're just like, "What? A black dragon can swim?" So yeah, they're great, and because they're so smart, they can enlist minions. So that's always more dangerous when these villains have henchmen. And then, of course, they're classic treasure hoards. You know,
Yeah.
no players can resist that. So I usually reward parties if they're fighting an adult or ancient dragon, that if they defeat it, they're going to find a massive treasure hoard of powerful items and treasure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember we were fighting I think it was an ancient black dragon. Um, and it had powers that were, that outmatched us. Like we were not quite, I don't think we were that high. I think we were like 14th level or something. And like it was using wings to like knock us all down, and it was
Yeah.
doing all kinds of things. Um and the I think the other memorable dragon was we were swimming down to a temple underwater, um, and we got down to a certain point, and the dragon was just sitting there near the temple.
Right.
Because we saw it first, it didn't do anything, and then we got down. And it turned out to be a gold dragon, just kind of hanging out for some reason. I've
Yeah.
forgotten
Yeah.
why the dragon was there, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, hey guys, yeah. So oh, you got to go that way. That's where the
Yeah.
thing is. You need to get like
Yeah.
it just gave us directions, and then it's like,
Yeah.
well, I got to go now, and then it left.
Yeah.
But just that moment of you see an outline of what you think is a dragon. Sorry, what? We're
Yeah.
underwater. We're
Yeah.
barely, like half
Yeah.
of us can't breathe underwater, so we're trying to get to the temple where we know there's air. But yeah, it was that was a memorable moment for me.
Yeah, that was
But
great.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember that. That was actually we talked the last episode about cursed magic items. That was around the time that you had to deal with that
that was the
berserker
same
act.
adventure. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that was the same. Like 10 minutes later,
yeah,
the whole cursed thing happened. But yeah, I mean, as you said, they're in the name, of the game, and but it's really a smart idea unless the adventure absolutely calls for it. You don't see them that often. They're doing their own thing. A lot of them are not that bright. They're kind of hanging around underground or garden whatever they want. But then you have all these dragons that are hanging around going, I've been thinking about philosophy. What do you guys think?
right.
The lawful good dragons, the few of them
Yeah,
there are.
yeah. Yeah, and then their lairs can be quite epic, which I always like to, you know, draw sort of almost like you're drawing the characters in further and further into into this
Yeah,
layer where they're going to be um at like the classic dungeon crawl and classic adventure storytelling. Yeah, they I never get tired of them, but I don't want to overuse them, and they have to
exactly.
be, like you said, it has to make sense in the story.
Yeah,
All right, at number one, which we've had some shows about these before. We talked about dragons before as well. At number one is the Beholder.
the
So
beholder.
yeah, and a lot of people, pretty close to being the number one creature associated with D&D after dragons is the Beholder. It's a classic
Yeah,
creature now, and only from the game, not from another mythology or folklore. This giant floating sphere with a huge central eye and then the eye stalks on top. There's a really good section in the Volo's guide about them. Uh, they're aberrations, so they're basically aliens from another world. Their rays that they can shoot out are incredibly powerful, including ones that can just disintegrate you. And then one of the more challenging parts is not only does it have these deadly rays that can literally just kill characters, but also that it has an anti-magic field where no magic. If it depends which direction the beholder is looking, but that direction now there's an anti-magic field in that area where no magic is going to work. Um, they can have really cool layers because the beholder is almost like an astronaut in space about how they, in the space station they can float up and down and in any direction, and they're sleeping upside down or sideways. The same thing with a layer for a beholder. You could have a central layer, and then you can have these passages going down or going up or going to the sides. And the passageways have to be large because the beholder is a big creature. So you can
yeah.
make really cool layers. Um, Another very bright creature that will often have minions and make things even more challenging for the characters.
Yeah, I think probably the most famous one is Xanathar. Is that right? That
It
the
is now, yeah.
who's kind of this sort of. I always think of him as Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah,
He's kind of
yeah,
like he's in
yeah,
the
that one is.
background doing the thing, and every so often he'll be like, "Hey, how's it going, boys and girls?" And then disappears again. But yeah, I mean, beholders in general. I mean, we've encountered undead ones. We've encountered what was the other one? There was one that had like some sort of special power. I've forgotten which one that was, but it was one of the adventures that you were running. And but yeah, I mean, and
Oh,
they can. Which one was it? Do you remember?
I think you're talking about there is a zombie version
Oh,
in
maybe
fifth
that's the one.
edition, so I've used that a couple of times. Oh, and then there's a super powerful. There's an eye tyrant, like almost like a king of the beholders. So
Yes,
that
yes,
that one actually took out half of your party once. Um,
yeah.
Yeah.
But don't remind me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is the thing: is that these creatures are. I think, as you put it, is that they're an alien from somewhere else, and there's definitely going to be a level of people being nervous about once they see one. Um, yeah, yeah, I mean, as players, you know exactly what they are, and you know that you're in trouble. If you're not 20th level, you're about to be roasted alive, or as you said, disintegrated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things where the DM can say, "Hey, I'm gonna this creature's got blah 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 eye stalks. It's going to now use this one and this one." And now I seem to recall. Do you randomize what the eye stalks are going to do each time they use one, or are they sort of preset for? I actually don't know.
You
Um,
can. For me, I think that's up to the dungeon master. You can roll and see which one is going to be the active ray, but
right,
I would choose. I would, yeah, because I think there's some things that you want to be have some control over the story, um, and that's one of those little things that I would do. I would choose the ray. I wouldn't roll, because I would
right,
only use these creatures if the players are ready for them.
right.
If you're below, again, you're below eighth, 10th level, you're just going to get wiped out. There's going to be no contest. So the
Because I
party has
I
to be
remember
ready for
being like second or third level, and we walked into somewhere, and you said, "So as you pass through the doors, you're now in this nice, gorgeous living room or whatever it was, and you see a beholder just across the way, and as it's going out another door, and then the door closes, and it turned out to be like a portal. But I think the we actually caught a peek of Xanathar, some powerful beholder, and yeah, and yeah, I remember because we were not that high level, like we were less than 5, and it was kind of like, oh crap, what have we just walked into?
Yeah,
Um,
I think that was an adventure that you and I were actually players in, and there was another dungeon master. I think it was the Waterdeep,
okay.
and yeah, I remember that, and that was Xanathar.
Oh, that was
We
Xanathar.
were
Yeah. Okay.
we
So
were
yeah,
like,
it
yeah, I think
was
we'll be going
scary.
now. All right, so that's
Luckily,
our top
Xanathar
10
had things
list.
to do.
We can do one for our books too, our monster books, because
I think
with
so.
the new one just finishing, we now have over 500 monsters. Kind of find that hard to
Well,
believe, but
like we touched on some of those monsters a few weeks ago, I think it definitely is. It's time for another book. I think for there's Feyland. Oh no, we already did Feyland, but there's also City. We've got some other ones. Um, the honorable mentions that you've noted here, by the way, I want to point out that you put hags on there.
yeah.
It was a toss up between golems and hags for me. I actually thought, because we've encountered hags in our adventures quite often, I've enjoyed that. And I thought,
Mhm.
but it's a classic creature. It's been around. It's in folklore. It's been around for a bazillion years. But I kind of thought, golems have a bit more of a punch. However, that's not to take anything away from hags. They're just very different creatures. But yeah, I give a thumbs up on the honorable mention for hags. Like that to me is again a toss up between some of the other ones.
Yeah, they're very like on my top 10 list because we did two top 5 lists tonight for you and I. On
Yeah,
my top 10 for sure I'd have hags and witches. I love classic creatures. And again, not because
yeah.
I like them at all, because I dislike them so much I want them defeated like the vampire. Um, that's actually probably my top 3 for being wanting to have them defeated is vampires, hags and witches, my least liked creatures. Um, yeah. And then I mentioned also honorable mention. I love the drow, the dark elves,
Yeah,
giants, genies. I think are underrated. Um, orcs are classic villains. If people understood what archetypes are these days,
yeah,
the Hydra. I love any kind of lycanthrope, especially werewolves. But I love all of them. Sahagwin, a classic D&D monster, I don't believe is from
yeah.
any kind of folklore. And then the Rakshasa, again, an underused monster. We could actually have our top 10 most underrated monsters. And I would put,
That is a great idea. We should do
yeah,
that.
I would put Rakshasa on that list for sure. and genies. So I would start with those two. Yeah,
I almost put wear anything because in D&D, I mean, you have wear something. So I think that that is definitely so basically a family of creatures that I think are fascinating because some of them can be so interesting and so not dangerous looking when you first encounter them. But,
exactly, exactly. Oh, that's one of
they
my
could just
favorite
turn
things
around and
to
suddenly you're
do.
like, oh no, I'm a werewolf? What? I think actually one of
Yeah,
my characters became a werewolf or was infected anyway for a while and did
yeah, you
change a
did.
couple of
You
times.
were a werewolf for for a period of time. Yeah, I think yeah, they're great. We have in our books we added weir fox, weir badger, and weir rabbit in the
Yep.
Phelan book.
I was gonna bring up the were rabbit one because to me
Yeah,
that's like it's like the big sharp pointy teeth where suddenly it's like, oh look at that rabbit. Oh look at that rabbit,
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like
No,
reaction, right?
this is not your cute bunny. And then we also have in the last book, the wilderness book, we have a weir meerkat. Um, I believe that's our four. I think we've just had four. Oh no. Oh, and then the king of the weir rats we also have in the city book. I think that's all of
Okay.
them. Although we have many creatures that are like weir creatures too. We have a
Right.
horse. We have a man who can like shape change into a horse, and a woman I named Lady Hawk who can turn into a hawk. Um,
Nice.
yeah. So yeah, there's yeah a lot of great creatures in the game, and yeah, it's going to be fun to think of good topics for next year. I think definitely underrated monsters, spells that we like. Yeah, we actually have probably 30 or 40 possible topics for our talks next year for our shows. So
Nice.
we'll take a look at those for January.
Yeah, which reminds me, well, we're taking a break over the next couple of weeks because, it is Christmas time and, family and all that kind of hanging out with people you want to hang out with. Um, and Santa will be here very shortly in a couple of weeks. So, but we'll be back, I think, first week of January. Is that our goal? Second week, first week, somewhere in there?
Yeah, probably I think first week, but we can talk about it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
And we'll all be recovering. We'll have like either eggnog hangovers or other types of hangovers at that point.
yeah. Boxes of
And hope.
shortbread. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to the shortbread. Actually, I'm every Christmas I get something like those boxes of shortbread, and I just yeah, they're my favorite.
nice.
But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. All of the information that we've talked about tonight, social media links, all that kind of fun stuff. Andrew will put those all down below. And so don't forget, you can subscribe here, or if you want to listen to us and not see our gorgeous faces, you can do that as well, of course, with our audio podcast version. So thank you all, and have a great holiday. I mean, why not? It's
Yeah.
almost here. I'm kind of excited.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
And see everyone next time.
Later.